All right. It's time to talk Green Bay Packers football on the Ourlads Football Network, Ourlads Football YouTube Channel. And coming back to join us once again from Packernet Podcast is Ryan Schlipp, also known as Pack Daddy. How's it going, Ryan?
It's real good. I'm sorry I botched our last meeting. The East Coast Central Time thing got me. That always gets me, but I'm very glad to be back here. I know we did this last year. It was a lot of fun, and as I said last time, I have a lot of respect for our lads, so this is very cool for me.
Appreciate that, and hopefully this is an opportunity for us to establish a longer-term relationship, and this is a great time, too, because, look, I mean, if you're a Packer fan in general, things have been pretty damn good for you for a very long time. But there's always that time in between, Favre to Rodgers and Rodgers to Love, a little bit nervous, not sure. But after what we saw last year, especially in the second half of the season, things look like they're in really good hands with Jordan Love, which I'm happy about since I have him on my dynasty team that I picked him up last year. We just started our league. But anyway, the fact is that there's a lot of signs pointing upwards for the Packers. We talked about that before earlier this year. What do you think about what Green Bay has looked so far during this offseason and, of course, in the preseason? Everything's still going as scheduled?
Everything's real good. One of the things I've pointed out specifically about Jordan Love is, last offseason, he really didn't look very good. It was kind of similar to how he started the season, where he'd be really cold the first half and kind of catch fire the second half of a game. Training camp was the same way. I mean, he was terrible, and you're thinking, oh, no, we're in trouble. And then he'd light it up, and you don't know what to think about that. And then, as you pointed out, the second half of the season, he looked really solid. Coming into this year, it was more of the second half than the first half. He's been, since he goes out there, a little stingier defense. There's been some sticky points in there, but for the most part, he and those wide receivers and everything, they picked up right where they left off. So you never know until they take the field. Anything can happen, but it's certainly encouraging to see that they're going out and just picking up right where they left off.
All right. As far as changes from last year's staff, the big one, of course, being the defensive coordinator, which we talked about, the new scheme change. The Packers hadn't run to 3-4 since 2008. Yeah. So that's definitely something that I'm sure everybody's looking at to see how that's working. So what you've noticed anything? You think it's going to take time or that would be a little bit overblown?
It's definitely been noticeable. Change doesn't necessarily mean better, but it's definitely changed. It's definitely different. I really, one of the things that was known about Hafley is his coaching style, in that it's very, it seems to be something that players can absorb, that they tend to understand it. I know under Joe Barry, part of the problem, whether you like the scheme or not, is the guys never knew what they were doing. It was, I don't know if it was too complex or what the situation is. Guys seem to be picking this up. You've seen a lot of drills, they emphasize turnovers a lot. Everybody talks about turnovers, but very rarely do you see a team drill it as much as these guys do, punching the ball out, working on, hands for the defenders and everything else. So we'll see how it all materializes. They're a very loud vocal group, a lot of guys from New Jersey and whatnot, so they're screaming and having a good time. So we'll see. The players seem to like it. It's an aggressive defense. That can get you into trouble if you're not good at it, giving up big plays and whatnot. But I think the fans are ready for a change. They've had sort of this passive bend, don't break defense going back through Pettin, going back through Dom Capers, and I think they're just ready for a change. So hopefully it works, but either way, it should be a more fun defense to watch.
Yeah, some of the stats looking over last year, you mentioned the takeaways. So they were 18th. They only had 18. That was 26th in the NFL. Yeah. They also had some issues on third down. They were 25th overall on stopping the opponent on third down. And also not very good against the run, 26th overall. No. I'm assuming that you mentioned the takeaways. That's being emphasized. Third down percentage. Well, that's something that, it's something we'll find out during the season.
Right.
But the thing that sticks out, though, that I'm sure can be emphasized even more than takeaways is stopping the run. So what have they done in the offseason? Not just the staff in general, but personnel to try to do a better job there.
Well, that's been kind of interesting for me, too, to kind of learn, because I'm so used to a 3-4, kind of getting to know this 4-3 a little bit. it kind of made me nervous because the Packers, again, going way back through Capers, have never had good run defenses. It's just been a curse. It's been a plague. And then you get this new scheme, and they're talking about, the guys up front who usually, especially under Pettin, but all these guys, those are the guys that are the main responsibility for stopping the run. And now we're hearing these guys, I don't care, just go get the quarterback. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, now we're really in trouble. But the results have been kind of shocking. And again, it's against our own team or whatever, but stopping the run has been significantly better, especially in training camp. I don't know that our guys have been able to get 2 yards ever. So I think it's a lot of eyes in the backfield. It's a lot of support from the corners, from the linebackers, from the safeties. It's more of a team effort as opposed to, we got 3 interior defensive linemen. You have to stop the run, and if you don't, you got linebackers going, I don't know what to do, At least that's how it felt. Okay. So it's you're hearing a lot. We're not seeing it, but you're hearing the reports in training camp of, Keyshawn Nixon tackling in the backfield, the safeties coming up and stopping people. So it's a very downhill, aggressive defense. So while the guys up front seem to be penetrating, everything behind that seems to be kind of everybody else's responsibility. That's the feeling I'm getting, and it seems to be working. So we'll see again when you get up against some tougher teams and some really good run offenses and whatnot. But it seems to be a much more difficult team defense to run against than I can remember.
All right. Well, let's talk about with the new 4-3 look. Let's talk about those 4 depth players on this depth chart, because what is obvious just looking at them is they're all fairly young. And they've been drafted over the last couple of cycles. So talk about those 4. Of course, Van Ness being the biggest one. And Van Ness was playing more of and that's the other thing too. We were used to seeing Preston Smith and Van Ness on the edge in a 3-4, more stand-up kind of deal. So is that how's that working in? Are they looking more just, even though they're going to be more hands in the dirt, and I'm assuming that's going to be the case, but overall, how does Van Ness look? How do those young guys look? And how are they taking, especially Van Ness, to the 4-3?
Yeah, I'm excited about that, especially for Van Ness. A lot of these guys, I feel like in college, it's hard to find a good stand-up outside linebacker. They exist, but college just tends to be more down defensive ends, and you got to convert them, like Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness. Now we're kind of getting them back to their roots a little bit. And also, it's just we're just asking you to be a pass rusher. You get down in that stance because we just want you to fire out of there. There's no dropping back or any of that. So I think Rashawn Gary also really appreciates that a lot. He's been a terror. But, Lucas Van, in my opinion, he looks good. People are very impatient among Packer fans a lot in this past game. He had, a couple pressures. He was doing some things. He didn't play very much, and everybody, what happened to that Van Ness guy? No, I think he's doing good. There's going to be some limited opportunities because Preston and Gary are going to be the top 2 guys on the edge. But I'm excited about it. They're also going to be using them inside a little bit, I think, which will be good to see. But I'm excited because we have some guys, a lot of guys actually, I think our GM prefers it, that are more pure pass rushers than anything else. Devontae Wyatt is the one I'm the most excited about on the interior. But some guys that it's like, maybe you're not the best against the run, but you going forward and getting the quarterback, I think you can do some stuff. And I'm excited to see Van Ness try to cultivate that a little bit.
Yeah, speaking of Wyatt, I was a big fan of his as well coming out a few years ago. Same thing, started off slow as a rookie, no big surprise, but then he really jumped up his game last year. So you think he's ready for a breakout?
Yeah, and listen, I mean, some people are really disappointed because he's not a very good run defender, and I don't know that that's going to change. I mean, his tackling is not the best, but if you're okay with a guy that's a pure pass rusher, I mean, he is such an athletic freak. My favorite story about him was in the combine when they were separating everybody out for drills. They had to put him with the linebackers because he was too fast. So, I mean, he is an absolute athletic freak. And it's a defense that's saying we're going to take a lot of the work off your plate up front, and we're going to ask you to penetrate. And I think he's built for that. I don't know that he's as wired for these sort of 2-gapping kind of defenses. Of anybody on that defensive line that I'm expecting a jump from, it's Devontae Wyatt.
Yeah, what about Brooks? Because Brooks is kind of similar in a way where, he's a good pass rusher, and he's a guy that has been known to play anywhere.
Right.
So where do you think he is going to play most of the time?
Well, Brooks and Wooden have mostly been interior guys. I think that's going to stay the plan. even though they were both edge guys. And I mean, Brooks was interesting because he's an edge guy that was like 300 pounds in college.
Yeah.
So it was really weird, but he was productive doing it. But yeah, I'm excited about both of them because they're edge guys that are really productive pass rushers, and they're going to come inside, and I think it's going to be the same thing. We just want you to get after it, and I think they've both done a really good job. My biggest issue is I always confuse the two. I don't know why that they're the same person in my mind. It's just, but no, they've done a good job. Brooks in particular, very, very talented. I think he's built for that role. They've trimmed him down a little bit, but no, he was great as a rookie. He's coming in. He's doing a good job so far. And the fact that he's so far down the depth chart, I mean, you're not planning on putting everything on his plate. The fact that it's like we're giving half our team a rest and this is what we have left kind of at the bottom of the barrel is really something because he's a talented guy.
So we know that they're pretty solid up front, in the middle, I should say, up front. But again, the run defense in general, you can kind of tell just looking at the depth of the defense why they probably had some issues in the run game. We just talked about some of these guys and really good against the pass, but not necessarily the run. So is there a player on the bench to look at and say, yeah, that guy is a guy that I would think might have the biggest upside as a run defender?
Well, you would hope it's TJ Slayton. He's kind of your big man in the middle. There's also Jonathan Ford, but he's hardly ever played. Slayton, surprisingly, has been more of a pass rusher than a run defender. I mean, as far as like how he grades out and everything. But I think you're kind of depending on him as that sort of 300-plus guy to be able to be that guy that can make an impact in there. Otherwise, you just jump to the linebackers and hope that they can kind of flow and make those kinds of plays. But yeah, if you got to pick somebody up front, Slayton's the guy that you're kind of pinning your hopes on.
All right, Enigbare, has he developed yet, or what's up with him?
I'm kind of torn on him. I almost, and it's kind of an unfair characterization, but he's the one guy that the switch to the 4-3. I wonder if it's a negative. I don't know that for sure, but you get a lot of these really big, bulky defensive ends. And I feel like Enigbare he's kind of a late round guy, and he was thriving. He was doing a pretty good job, and I just wonder if this works. It might work in his favor. It might work against him. I don't know. But now we're getting some more tough competition in there. Brenton Cox is another guy, a little bit further down the depth chart, but he's kind of nipping at Enigbare's heels. He had a really good week 2 preseason game. I think he had like 5-6 pressures, something like that, in very limited opportunities. And he's absolutely going to benefit from the 4-3 scheme. So I like Enigbare. He's going to be in the rotation. He's not going to lose his job. But I don't know that he's moving up anything. And again, if Brenton Cox does step ahead of him, Kingsley falls to 5 with Van Ness now in the mix.
Are they going to play mostly with 2 linebackers like the depth chart shows here? Or
I mean, it's probably going to mostly be playing nickel, I would assume.
Okay.
I don't know what percentage is going to be base. I think standard is maybe like 30% or something. We'll have to see how he runs things. Even looking at what he did in college, you never know because the NFL is a different game. But I would assume it's going to be. And the weird thing is, Edgerrin Cooper's been hurt, so we haven't really seen him much. So I think the way that the website has it with McDuffie and Walker is correct right now. And then Eric Wilson's kind of been the next man up because Tyron Hopper and Cooper have been hurt quite a bit. So eventually, the assumption is it's going to be Quay and Cooper.
Okay. And as far as these injuries, and we're going to get it, we might as well talk about it now. So what's the status of both Cooper and Hopper? Are they going to be okay when the season begins?
So Hopper just came back. We just got to see him in this last preseason game, so that was good. He actually did a pretty good job. Edgerrin Cooper, I don't know. Same with Jordan Morgan. Same with Marshawn Lloyd. So first, second, and third round picks there are dealing with some nagging injuries. The coach always says, it's not serious and everything's going to be okay, but that doesn't really mean anything to me. They said that about David Bakhtiari, who was out for like 3 years. So
yeah, right. Okay.
It's just kind of a wait and see. I think Marshawn Lloyd, the running back, I think just kind of tweaked a hamstring, which seems minor, but again, hamstrings can linger. So I don't really know the status, but I think for all of them, you're kind of expecting, if you were to ask the coach anyways, by week 1, they would be back.
Okay. All right, take a look at that secondary. And McKinney, of course, being the huge move, also spent one of their top draft picks on Bullard. So Alexander, we know how good he is. We also know how good of a defensive backs coach the new defensive coordinator is. So this is really where the Packers need to make the most improvement, maybe on the entire team.
Exactly. Yeah, no, and not only that, they brought in Derek Ansley to be the DB coach, so who's just a defensive coordinator. So, in my opinion, they have a lot of overqualified players that are there. They brought in a lot of talented people, and yeah, there's a lot of DB talent on the coaching staff right now. So, yeah, like you said, you got Jair, who's already a premier talent. Eric Stokes was a first-round pick. He's been dealing with injuries and whatnot, but hoping for a big jump from him. Xavier McKinney was one of the top safeties in football last year. Javon Bullard, a second-round pick. This has to be a big deal for the Packers. And I think just from a scheme standpoint, too, because you're running a more aggressive kind of press man-style defense, you need talented DBs to be able to make that work. So if they can't swing it, that's going to be the breakdown in this chain. A lot of optimism. Javon Bullard, haven't seen a ton of him, but he's been relatively promising. Evan Williams, though, I think has been the most, of all the rookies so far, maybe. Evan Williams, a fourth-round pick safety, has been really, really impressive, especially in his, I know in college he was really well known for his blitzing, but the blitzing, the run defense, the tackling from Evan Williams has been really, really impressive. So quite a few additions.
Maybe not surprising, too, because he's very experienced.
Yeah, definitely. So excited to have him on board. I don't know how that's all going to work out. Everybody's trying to find a way to get all of them, including Oladapo, on the team to get in there. But it's probably just going to be those guys with Evan Williams kind of sitting out, aside from a couple little this or that packages or whatever. But excited to have them, and we'll see how Hafley decides to relegate that.
All right. Offensively, and we talked about Love, of course. So taking a look at that backfield. Now, Jacobs, and this could go for fantasy fans as well. So what are you thinking? What are you seeing so far from Jacobs? Because last year just didn't seem like a typical Jacobs year. I know he was coming. I don't know what the excuses were, whether he was a little banged up or whatever the case may be, but he just didn't seem like himself. Maybe he knew the writing was on the wall. I'm not going to kill my body. I need to save it. But he just didn't seem like the same guy. What are you seeing so far?
Yeah, so it's been very limited exposure with Josh Jacobs. I know that is the big question. Are we going to get 2022 or 2023 Josh Jacobs, which the gap is massive. He was maybe the best back in football in 2022, but the other big thing that they're really wanting to add to his game is receiving. He was not used as a receiver very much. Matt LaFleur has talked about it in terms of like being shocked by that because they think he's really impressive in that regard. So that'll be interesting to see. I do think they're going to try to put quite a bit on his shoulders. They do like to spread the ball around a little bit, but I think a lot of that had to do with Aaron Jones being at the front before, and they didn't want to put too much of a load on him. I think they're going to try to change that. Dillon is right now the backup with Marshawn Lloyd having almost no experience, and I don't think they want to put a ton on Dillon's shoulders. There's been a lot of talk about him looking better, but I think that just means physically in terms of the shape of his body. As far as in camp and in preseason, Dillon has looked like the same Dillon, which is really just not super productive.
Okay.
So I would, at least that's my hope, I guess, is that they try to do less of a 50-50 split like they've done in the past and really just ride the hot hand, which is going to be Jacobs, at least I hope. But we'll have to see. And then you get Marshawn Lloyd in the mix. I mean, just from a fantasy perspective, I'm saying I'm hopeful, but, the Packers do like to disappoint everybody and let Dillon and Lloyd and everybody else get their hands in there and snipe away carries and whatnot.
Yeah, especially at the goal line.
Exactly. Yeah, they'll find somebody else to do it.
How behind is Lloyd regarding the injury situation?
Well, I mean, he just hasn't really practiced very much, which I think is the frustration. I mean, Matt LaFleur actually sounded extremely frustrated in the press conference about Marshawn Lloyd and his injury. I think they really were depending on him to take on a bigger role in it. I don't want to say he's going to redshirt because he's going to play, but it gets to the point where when the season starts and we have to game plan, how much are you going to game plan around a guy that we haven't practiced with? We haven't had an opportunity to put your hands on him. So, I mean, if he doesn't get on the field soon and really kind of show what he can do, he may be relegated to a very small role this year for a while. So we'll have to see how that all pans out. It might just be more of a next year thing for him.
Is that a good opportunity then for Wilson?
Well, I mean,
to get some carries. I mean, it looked okay in limited carries last year.
Yeah, I do like Wilson, but I kind of feel like Marshawn Lloyd will take the Wilson role. He'll be the one that just get those handful, and Wilson will be probably, I mean, maybe practice squad. I hate to even say it, but I don't know if they're going to carry all 4 of them.
All right. By the way, Pratt, how's he been looking?
I love Pratt. I liked him in college a lot. I felt stupid when I was saying I would have taken Pratt in the 2nd round and he fell to the 7th. But now the way he's playing, I'm starting to pipe up a little bit again.
Okay.
But no, he's looked real good. I mean, this last preseason game was a little rocky. The whole team was really struggling. But I mean, Pratt, I've said before, prior to this game, I don't think he's made a single mistake. In training camp, he's been lights out. In the first preseason game, he was lights out. He has been really, really impressive. Again, this past preseason game wasn't his best effort, but it wasn't necessarily devastating either. And for a guy that's come from a smaller school and doesn't even understand, I mean, they're just basically working on, the fundamentals of footwork and the offense. He doesn't know anything. He's just winging it out there. So as a developmental prospect, I'm very excited about Pratt.
Packers I know they're gonna play both Musgrave and Kraft a lot. If you had to guess which one will end up being more productive,
I'm leaning pretty heavily into Musgrave. There's a lot of Tucker Kraft fans, and for good reason. He's a good guy, but you look at how Luke Musgrave. First of all, I mean, just the way he's built, Matt LaFleur is going to love him. I mean, he is a speed demon. He's a big, fast guy that you can really do a lot of stuff with, and also just the way he came on toward the end. So essentially, the way it worked for him was he was not very good for about the first half, about the same as Jordan Love. He really started to kick into gear, and then he got hurt. And then he was out for quite a while. He came back for the last 2 games of the season, and he was maybe, I mean, it's, looking at from a grading standpoint, graded out better than just about anybody else. I mean, he blew up. And so I'm excited to see if he can, similar to some of these other guys, pick up where he left off, because I think there's a lot of talk about the wide receivers. I don't think there's nearly enough talk about the tight ends, and in my opinion, especially Luke Musgrave.
Okay, speaking of the wide receivers, the Packers, I believe, have the most talented young group of receivers in the league. Yeah. And we saw some of that last year, even when Bo Melton started to play well. And me being a Rutgers guy, I know how good he is, and I'm glad to see that he finally woke up last year. But bottom line, and sometimes you just need to find the right spot. So how do you think, with how deep this unit is, do you think there will be like a number one? Is Watson still capable of being a number one?
I don't think so. It was funny. I don't. The coach was asked about it for like the 20th time, and he said it made him want to vomit every time somebody asked him about it. So I think his answer is no. But I vacillate on it so much. I mean, I think Watson is the most talented receiver that we have, but I also think he's not going to be sort of that down-to-down productive guy. I think that's probably going to lean more toward Romeo Doubs, because Jordan Love seems to really, really like Romeo Doubs. However, Dontavian Wicks, in my opinion, is just Romeo Doubs, just slightly better at everything. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's got better hands, And then Jaden Reed is what he did last year, if he can take a step. So I don't think I can put my finger on it. I think it'll be similar to what we had back when it was Jordy and Randall and all those guys, where one day it's a Jennings game, one day it's a Jordy game. I think it'll be a similar situation with these guys.
All right. And then how does the rest of the competition for those last couple of spots? Is Melton still looking okay?
Melton struggled the last couple times with drops. He's still a really talented guy. He's still getting a lot of opportunities. He's having some drop issues, which, it's not going to boot him off the team or anything, but obviously he's got to clean that up. Malik Heath, I think, is what he is. He's he reminds me of like Geronimo Allison a little bit. He's at his ceiling. He's not really going to surpass that, but he's a reliable guy. He'll pick up a third down here and there. And then Grant DeBose has been the guy that has really exploded this year. He had a drop in this past game. Everybody this last week, just disregard everything. Everybody was bad. But DeBose, all the way through camp, has exploded as one of the top guys that we've seen. So, and Samori Toure remains where he is. I would say, I mean, if we were to just go based on this training camp, after Wicks or after whoever the number 4 is, you'd borderline want to put Grant DeBose in that slot. But it really is tough. I mean, with Bo Melton and what he did last year and what he's able to do, Malik Heath's reliability, Grant DeBose and what he's shown this year, Samori Toure is kind of similar. There's definitely a second tier with those 4 guys, but I think you feel good down the depth chart with any of those guys as sort of like a number 3 or 4 option kind of a guy.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm a team like the Dallas Cowboys, there might be another few teams out there that have some wide receiver depth issues. Sure. I mean, I'm calling the Packers.
100%, yeah.
I mean, I can imagine. In a way, I'd kind of be surprised if the Packers didn't trade one of these guys, even though it's a late round pick. But they might say to themselves, well, I mean, where are we going to put them? We might as well get something in return. So...
No, that 100%, and you know they're a draft and develop team, and obviously you want to develop them for your own roster, but like you said, there's no more space, so they're just going to sit on your bench, even if there's an injury. You know, some of these guys. I mean, if Wicks goes down, I mean DeBose isn't going to go in. They're going to put in Bo Melton or somebody else. So some of these guys, there's not enough injuries in the world that they're ever going to see the field.
Yeah. So and then you put them on the practice squad and forget.
Right. Yep.
So, okay. And then the offensive line. So again, this is another key for the Packers offense. And it always seems to be in flux, like every year. I can't figure out, like they're definitely not one of those lines where you go, oh yeah, the Packers, those 5 starters played the entire season in the same spots. I mean, it just doesn't happen in Green Bay. So what's looking good and what's not looking good?
A lot of consternation. I think at the very least, everybody acknowledges there's no depth. It's pretty rough as far as depth goes. Rasheed Walker stays at left tackle. I think he's solid enough. Elton Jenkins is the left guard, solid enough. Josh Myers, I think last year really struggled. I think most people are not necessarily content with that. You could argue there's a competition there, but I don't necessarily see that. It was kind of interesting. Sean Ryan was basically the entire center in this last preseason game, and he's never been a center. He's always been a guard, and they're really pushing him in that direction, it seems. Jacob Monk also getting some opportunities. Jordan Morgan, who we thought we were drafting a tackle, sounds like he's officially a guard. Maybe that's just because of our guard situation, but it kind of is starting to feel like they just drafted a guard in the first round. And then Zach Tom is the one guy I think you feel really good about over at right tackle. Everybody else was question marks. So I think that's the 5, and I think you feel fine with it. A lot of people are panicked about it, but it's basically last year's, I mean, you hope it's last year's offensive line, but healthier and with an upgrade at right guard. But again, if anybody goes down, I don't think you feel good. There's a lot of question about who's your number 3 tackle. No idea, and you don't feel great about it. Andre Dillard, Royce Newman, Kadeem Telfort. And then on the interior, some people think Sean Ryan might be ready. Hard to say. He hasn't been up to the last couple years he's been here. So we'll see. I mean, somebody's going to have to step up and hopefully fill that role, whether it's rookie Jacob Monk or Sean Ryan, who's been here for several years. But either way, I think there's a lot of hope moving forward. And maybe they do something before the season starts. But there's a lot of hope moving forward that we got to kind of attack this a little bit. And they have been. But we got to continue to attack this multiple times in the draft just to, if nothing else, build out this depth.
How is the, we talked about injuries. So right now, there isn't a player that is in jeopardy of like serious jeopardy of missing time when the season starts.
Serious jeopardy. I'm trying to look through. I don't necessarily think so. I might be missing a big one, but nothing comes to mind. I mean, again, anything can happen with the guys that are a little banged up, but I think there's at the very least fingers crossed for guys like Jordan Morgan and whatnot that they'll be back in the near future.
Okay. Give me a breakout player on both sides, somebody that is ready to take that next step.
Well, I think I kind of already leaned into one on each side. I think on defense, Devontae Wyatt is the one that immediately comes to mind. I'm trying to think if there might be another outside of Wyatt. I mean, maybe kind of low-hanging fruit, but I would watch out for Rashawn Gary. I know he's already seen as a really good pass rusher, but I also think he's not given the full respect because he doesn't quite get the stats. He doesn't get the sack numbers that some of the other guys do or whatever, and there's been some injuries and whatnot. I think if he can stay healthy, I think we're going to start hearing his name put in the category of some of the bigger name guys because I think the stats will come.
Okay.
So that might be something to keep an eye on. On offense, again, Musgrave, I think makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
If for no other reason than he's just not really being talked about, and I think he can be a guy that Matt LaFleur really wants to get involved heavily in the offense. And then sort of a non-Musgrave guy, again, Watson would make a lot of sense. Again, if he can stay healthy.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Man, oh man. And the other good thing is, that connection is tough. I remember Rodgers and MVS trying to connect on that deep ball. They just couldn't do it. For whatever reason, they couldn't get the timing right. There was a little bit of that with Jordan and Watson. It's a tough thing to get that deep ball down. It's a tough route to run. They've been really, really good on that. I mean, there was one time I remember, and the only reason I remember it is because I said, okay, it finally happened. But there was a lot of last year, Watson was open, but it was short. It was overthrown. It was this, it was that. There's just not that. There's once per training camp or twice or whatever you hear that there's a 40-yard strike to Watson down the right sideline or whatever. So they have really worked on that, and it sounds like it's a lot better than it was. So I'm very optimistic that Watson's going to have a better year this year.
Yeah, I had him last year on my year-to-year, and it was so frustrating, as you know.
Right.
Really frustrating. Okay, special teams. How's the kicking game looking?
Punting is a lot more optimistic than kicking. There's not a lot of patience left for Anders Carlson. He's a young guy. I don't really fully understand the frustration, other than, obviously you just don't like a guy that misses kicks. But Greg Joseph is not going to win the competition. Neither is Alex Hale. I don't think anybody was really ever going to take the job away from Anders Carlson. And with Greg Joseph going out and just shanking the one field goal opportunity in this last game, I feel much more confident in what I've been saying.
What a terrible game. That was glad I didn't watch it.
Everything went wrong. But look, it hasn't been great. I think his percentage right now in camp is like 83%. It's not what you want it to be. But it is what it is. I mean, he's either going to develop into the guy, like his brother. It was like a year or two. He was terrible. He got traded, and he went on to have a really good career. Yeah. The Packers are hoping they can do that with Anders. If they can't, we move on. If he can, then great. But as of right now, it's just he's a subpar kicker as far as field goals go. I know last year he had a real big problem with extra points, which is pretty bad. And then long snapping also has been a revolving door that I don't know why that's such a hard thing for us to nail down, but it just has been. So the whole operation has been tough. But at least punting is going well.
Yeah, and they've got that Irish kid, which is always cool.
Exactly,
that's nice. And Nixon, he is one of the best, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping. I mean, I keep questioning it because the kickoff is different, and a lot of people that understand it have been talking about, it's a little bit more built for running backs as opposed to wide receivers of the past in terms of the skill set. Keyshawn is neither, so I'm hoping he's just talented at finding space and running and whatnot. I think he'll be fine at it. I just hope it's not a pretty big detriment. The other issue is that I feel like the NFL thought that if they brought it to the 30 that nobody would ever kick it into the end zone.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. I think there's going to be a lot of that because, first of all, I've noticed that's what everybody's doing.
Yeah.
But second of all, a lot of these kicks are getting returned to the 30 anyways. So if most guys are getting it to the 30 and you have a guy like Nixon that's able to bring it out to the 40, 45 or more, screw it. We'll just take it to the 30, which really just means better field position and more scoring on offense, not necessarily a more exciting kickoff. But we'll see how that evolves over time. But I know Matt LaFleur was saying he was shocked to find so many people kicking into the end zone. I think that's probably why.
Yeah, it's you wonder whether or not it's also some gamesmanship. It's the preseason.
Sure, yeah. We don't want to show you what we're doing.
Yeah, but I guess we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah.
So, all right, prediction. What are you feeling about the atmosphere? We know what happened last year. I thought Green Bay was the better team against San Francisco, but that's all part of the learning process, I guess. Do they take the next step? And are the Packer fans going to be disappointed if they do not reach the Super Bowl?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a good question because most people want to know the record prediction, but that's less interesting because I'm not worried about the record. I think they're going to be good enough to get into the playoffs, whether that's 10 wins or 13 wins. The question is, unlike every year, can you go to the playoffs and actually get through it? As opposed to, laying an egg like every year, there's just a game that you don't show up for, like in San Francisco. So I do think there's going to be disappointment. There's some truth to the whole entitled town narrative among Packer fans for not being grateful for the great stuff that we have. But at some point, it really is, it's cool we get to the playoffs, but man, we really have to find a way to get over that hump. And whatever it is, it's a mentality thing. teams like the Chiefs, they go to and win the Super Bowl because they don't have those days. They don't have those games inexplicably in the postseason where it's like, oh man, they just didn't show up. But the Packers do have that, and it's some kind of a mentality thing that Matt LaFleur needs to figure out, and they got to get over that.
And so it sounds like you're not optimistic this is the Super Bowl season.
I'm as optimistic as I can be in terms of they have the talent to get it done, but they've had that. They had it in 2020. They had it in 2021. They had it last year. I thought going into, as hot as they were coming out of that Dallas game, they had everything they needed to beat the 49ers and beat the Chiefs, who they just beat earlier in the season. So I know they're talented enough. It's just I don't have the answer for how you avoid that catastrophic game. I don't know what the answer to that question is.
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to RJ Ochoa from Blogging the Boys about the Cowboys' mental playoff issues. And it is. I mean, look, I'm a Jet fan, so just getting to the playoffs would be a great thing.
Right.
But you carry that weight of and it's that coaching staff too that needs to get over the hump, because one of those guys has to do it. And if not, then I guess no matter how successful you are as a head coach, you got to move on to the next guy, even though I don't see that happening anytime soon. But sooner or later, you got to start producing in the postseason.
Yeah, and that's a tough call, because how do you fire a successful coach? Depending on how you determine success, but
yes,
that's tough. And I don't know, and I hope we don't have to worry about that. But yeah, if it's 5 years of playoffs and no results after that, you got to start asking questions.
Well, I have a lot of optimism for the team. I know you do, and I know the fans do. So it's just a matter of getting it done when it counts. Hopefully there'll be a healthy season, and then we'll go from there. So, by the way, the Packernet Podcast, how often are you doing that, Ryan?
So that is when I'm able to do it, a twice daily, technically 3 times daily podcast. I do 2, and then I have another guy that does a podcast. So mine is every morning. It gets launched at 4, and then we also have a call-in show. So you can call in, and then every night we do, callers can call in, ask whatever they want, usually about football, but not always. Sometimes we're talking about smoking meat or whatever it is. So, it's a good time. So I'd encourage anybody that wants to come in and talk football to give us a call.
Excellent, Ryan. Appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you at some point during the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about it.
All right, Ryan. Thanks, and we'll talk to everybody real soon here on the Ourlads Football Network with our next interview, which I believe is coming up this afternoon. We're going to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals with John Sheeran, but we'll talk more Green Bay Packers football during the season with Ryan. And again, thanks a lot, Packernet Podcast, and you can't miss it 3 times a day. That's awesome.